Hi, and here's a video on basic factoring. So later on we might be doing factorizing when the lowest common factor is a bracket. But for now, I'll just make a short video on the basic factoring review. So as we said, like in the last lesson, you probably did a bit of expanding, where expanding is when you've got a question like this and you're asked to expand. So it means expand means to remove the brackets. So you would do 5 multiplied by x and 5 multiplied by -1. So your answer would be 5x, take away 5. Factoring is the reverse step. Factoring is when you're given the factorized version as the answer and they want you to go back to the expanded version. So to do the reverse step basically. So this is what I've said here. Factorizing is like the opposite of expanding. It's like where you're given the answer to an expanding problem like this and you're asked to work, answer to an expanding problem like this, and you're asked to work backwards to see what the original expression was before the brackets were removed. So this would be the question, this would be the answer. So that's what they've kind of tried to point out, like going from here to here is what we call expansion. So following the arrow from here to here is expanding. Doing the reverse step, going from here to here, is factorizing. So when you're factorizing, you've got to be thinking, rather than multiply, when you expand, you're multiplying. What you're doing when you're factorizing is you're dividing both terms by what we call the highest common factor. So something like 5x minus 5, what's the highest common factor of 5x? And subtract 5. So the highest common factor of both of these terms would be 5. So that's what we've got to do first. You've got to look for the highest common factor, and that's the thing that goes out the front of the brackets. So the highest common factor could be a number, it could be a letter, it could be a number and a letter together, like it could be 5x out the front. Just has to be a fact, like 5x wouldn't be the highest common factor of this expression because there's no x in this one, but there is a 5. You can divide them both by evenly by 5. There's a few other notes here if we want to read through them. So let's see. So to factorize an algebraic expression involving a number of terms, we look for a number of terms, for example 2. We look for the highest common factor. There could be 3 instead, or 4 or 5, etc. We look for the highest common factor of all the terms. So you've got to look for what's the highest common factor of all the terms in the expression. We therefore write the highest common factor in front of the set of brackets. So what I tend to do is I think of what is the highest common factor first, I write it out, and then I open up my brackets. We then identify the contents of the brackets. So you've got to think 5 times what would have generated 5x. So that's right, 5 times x would have generated 5x. And then 5 times what would have generated subtract 5. 5 times -1 would have generated subtract 5. So for example, 6a squared and 2ab, what's the highest common factor of both of those terms if they were together in an expression? That's right, it would be 2a. So 2, because 2 goes into both 2 and 6, and both of them have a. You can't say 2ab because there's no b in this term, and you can't say 2a squared because there's no a squared in this term. So if the expression was 6a squared plus 2ab, you could think, you don't have to write out this step, you could go, I tend to go straight to here. Identify the highest common factor, which is 2a, write 2a out the front of the brackets, then I open up the brackets, I tend to open it up and just leave it open, and then think 2a times what would have made 6a squared, then I think, okay, that would have been 3a, because 2a times 3a is 6a squared. 2a times what would have made 2ab, that's right, 2a times b would have made 2ab. So here's another one. Consider the expression 8x plus 4. What's the highest common factor of 8x and 4? Have a think. Some of you might think it's 2. Well, 2 is a common factor, but it's not the highest common factor. So this would be a mistake. This would not be the correct answer because 2 is not the highest common factor of 8x and 4. Have a think. What is the highest common factor of 8x and 4? That's right, it's 4. So instead it should be this, 4 out the front. So if you made this mistake and you thought it was 2 instead that was the highest common factor, you would have had 4x plus 2 in the brackets because that times that is 8x, that times that is 4. But notice that 4x plus 2 could have been factorized further. It's not been fully factorized yet, the whole expression, because 4x and 2 have a common factor of 2. So that's that another 2 would come out and generate 4. So instead, try to think straight up what is the highest common factor, but you can also double check if the thing in your brackets could be factorized further. that's a clue that you didn't originally take out the highest common factor, and you might need to think again what the highest common factor is. So that's a way of checking your answers. So the expression 8x plus 4, the highest common factor is 4. So you write 4 out the front, you open up your brackets, and then you think 4 times what makes 8x, and then it's 2x therefore. 4 times what makes 4, so it's 4 times 1 is 4. So sometimes people forget the fact you can have a 1 there. So that's what we call fully factorized. Here's another expression, fully factorized. 3a plus 6. Try to think what's the highest common factor of 3a and 6. That's right, it's just 3, because there's no a here. So you can only take out 3. And then so you would write the brackets, you'd write 3, and then you'd open up your brackets, and then think what needs to be inside the brackets. So you have a little pause and think. And there we go. So therefore, you don't need to see this step here. I tend to think like it's not necessary, so I don't bother to include it. So you don't need to include it. I just tend to go straight to this. Highest common factor, you might want to write out what the highest common factor is, because maybe that just helps you remember how to do it. And if you made a total mistake here, maybe you might get a mark for that, I don't know. So I tend to do the part in red first. I write the highest common factor out the front first, 3. Then I open up my brackets. So I've done the first step is to do the red step. Then the green step is what I do last. So 3 times what generates 3a, 3 times a. And 3 times what generates 6, 3 times positive 2. And that's the answer to the factorized version. Something like ab minus 2bc. There's no number other than 1 that's common to both of those. So instead it's just going to potentially be a letter. So is there a letter that appears in both of them? Yep, there is. There's b. A doesn't appear in both and C doesn't appear in both. So it's not going to be BC or AB. So it's just going to be B. Highest common factor is B. So I do the blue step first. Blue step, B, open up your brackets. And then you think B times what makes AB? B times A makes AB because BA is the same as AB. And B times what makes minus 2BC? B times negative 2C makes minus 2BC. And that's the answer. Yeah, and if maybe there might be, so occasionally you might get a trick question where there is no common factor other than 1. So if there is no common factor other than 1, the answer is just the expression itself, because you can't factorize it, to be honest. So that could happen. So you might be asked something like factorize 16x plus 20y. You've got to think, is there a letter that's in common to both of them? No, there's not. So it's just a number. So 2 is common to both of these because they're both even, but is it the highest common factor? That's what you would have to think of. And the answer is no. So that's why in earlier years, like year 7 and that kind of thing, we practice finding the highest common factor because it's helpful for later years when you use it in algebra. So the highest common factor of 16x and 20y is 4 because 8 goes into here but not into here and so on. So 4, I do the red step first. 4, open up my brackets. Then I do the green step last. 4 times what makes 16x? 4 times 4x. 4 times what makes 20y? 4 times 5y. Easy peasy. Let's just do some more expressions, some more factorizing. So we've got factorize 18x plus 24x squared. So 2 is common to both of them, but there is a higher one. That's right, there's 6. 6 is common to both 18 and 24. Plus there's going to be a letter. You can take out an x from here and an x from here. You can't take it out an x squared because that's not x squared. X is only to the power of 1 in the first term. So the highest common factor is 6x, sometimes with, as I said, writing out. So I do my green step first. I go 6x, then I open up my brackets, and then I do the red step last. 6x times what makes 18x? That's right, 6x times 3 makes 18x. 6x times what makes 24x squared? And 6x times 4x, because we need to have an x here to generate an x squared here, but we only needed an x there, so no need to put an x on this one. So on. Here's an example of where there's more than 2 terms. So factorize, big complicated one, 22x squared y cubed plus 33x squared y squared minus 44x 4y. So I guess there's probably going to be a number and a letter maybe that comes out. So try to think what is a number first. There's 22, 33, 44. That's right, the number is 11. Is highest common factor of all of those. Then you've got for the x's, you've got an x squared, an x cubed, and an x4. So the biggest thing that's common to all of those is x squared. So you will take out an x squared. In terms of the y's, you've got a y cubed, you've got a y squared, and you've got a y to the power of 1. So the biggest thing you can take out is just y to the power of 1. So the highest common factor is 11x squared y. Write out the front of the brackets and open up your brackets, and there's going to be 3 terms inside the bracket this time. So, you might also want to make a note of this. So the reason why we've got x squared and not x cubed and x4, it's because that's the lowest power of x, and x does appear in all of them. And y does appear in all of them, and the lowest power of y is y1. And so we do the red step, 11x squared y, open up your brackets, and then that 11x squared y times what makes 22x squared y cubed. 11x squared y times 2y squared, because we need a 22. We've already got an x squared, and we need to make y cubed, so y times y squared. So you just go very carefully and systematically, and then it's pretty easy. 11 times what makes 33x cubed y squared. So 11 times 3 has to happen. We need an x cubed, so we need to times by an x, and we need a y squared, so we need to times y by y in order to generate that. To make minus 44 here, we need to multiply by negative 4, and x squared needs to become x4, so we need to multiply by another x squared, and y is already just y, so we've got that covered already. One like this, you could double check by expanding it if you've got the time. That's always a good way to double check. So I've got little extra notes here just pointing out y1 times y squared makes y cubed. So that's kind of why we've got that there. This one, yeah. So this one is explaining that point there, if you need to put an arrow there. y1 times y squared makes y cubed, just in case you were a bit unsure of why that was. And x squared times x squared makes x4. So that's in terms of this one. So if you want to put an arrow there, because x squared times x squared makes x4. And that's the end of the lesson. Thank you very much.